We are super excited to announce our collaboration with two of the best players in Europe, Angelo Truscello and Enrico Maria Rustico. If you're looking to pick up one of their guides, make sure to use the code HILL10 for 10% of your order, while also supporting the channel. And now a quick word from our sponsor SleeveShift. If you are into any kind of TCG or you just like anime, make sure to use the code HILL5 for 5% of your order while supporting the channel. Today we are with a very special guest, Thomas Biero, the winner of the Bordeaux Regional, the very first regional played with OP13 Legal, with Imu. We'll be talking about his deck choices, key moments of the tournament, and his thoughts about the meta. Thomas, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Let's start with your list. There has been a lot of discussion about this topic, so why did you decide to not play STUSSY, and what do you think about the card in this meta?
So at first, when I stopped playing STUSSY, I feel like you really need this card in some specific point of the game, like your 9 on turn on matchup like aces. In the mirror matchup, you don't really need it, except in the situation where your opponent played a 5 elder and you want to outplay him by playing a STUSSY and KO the 5 elder. In the ZORO matchup, you don't play a lot of big body. Now some lists play 9 cost ZORO or 10 cost Shanks, but not a lot of copy. So at the end of the day, there was just in a specific matchup you wanted to play like ace, where you wanted to play on the 9 cost turn when you go first. In all the other situations, you wanted to play some other card, like on your 10 on turn, you want to play just 5 elder and that's it. What I feel with STUSSY is like you just wanted it in a specific point, but to have it on the specific point, you need to draw it. You can't search it with your events, so it's not really a consistency card. And I feel like if you really want it on your 9 on turn, you need to play 3 copy of it, and it was too much effort because most of the time you're going to be a brick. You're going to extend the chance to get to a whiff on your church event or your Charlotte. So at the end of the day, I tried without STUSSY. I saw that on my 9 on turn I had more option because STUSSY need a big setup, because on this turn you can play a blocker, you can play Wakuri to defend yourself, you don't have done up to play an event, and I feel like on my 9 on turn I have like better option than STUSSY. I could play some other card like CHARLOS in my deck and would have given me more option at this moment.
On the other hand, you did choose to include the Saint CHARLOS. What led you to that decision? Yep. And did it end up being useful throughout the tournament?
Yeah, I got STUSSY to play CHARLOS at the end of the day, and I think it's the best decision I did. I saw that a lot of players did the same decision, so at the end of the day it confirmed my shots. I feel like CHARLOS is a better card than STUSSY because he can be useful in every matchup of the meta. There are only 3 of them. Against Ace, you can play it in early game, and it can help you block a 7k attack, so it's a 2 card in 1. On your 3 on turn when you first, it gives you the option to play it. Most of the time this turn is a bit flat, depending of the situation. In the ZORO matchup, it can help you having 2 blocker on the same turn. You can play on your 6 on turn Valkyrie and 2 down CHARLOS, so you can block first time ZORO effect, and then he restand his leader, attack again. You can block again with your second blocker, and having again another done up to play an event if you want, or you can do the same in the 5 down turn or any other turn right after this. So it helps you in this matchup, and obviously in the mirror it helps you when your opponent play Jupiter and do 7k attack. Same as against 8 in the early game, it's a card that can do a 3k counter if you attack with 7, so I think CHARLOS is a good option. I even thought at the moment playing 3 of them, but would have need to cut some card, and I think at the end just playing 2 is a sweet spot for the deck.
I also noticed that you include the 1 cost GARP counter in your list. How did you feel about the card overall? Did its restriction ever cause you issues during the tournament?
At first I played the GARP event to be a 5th copy of Shiroshi because I feel like it was a good card to take off some card of your opponent, and in a lot of matchup it can be really useful. And to put back a 5 holder or even spell, because in the early game it's not really what you want to search. You want to assemble your combo pieces, and to find the card you will need to arrive to your tendon turn to play your 5-elder. So it was really interesting. And then with some trying, I thought could also be free counter events, like searching for Xiaoxi or any other 2K. It was a good option too in some matchup where you take a lot of 5K to have a card that was neutral to protect yourself, and it could help you sometime in some matchup like Ace when you have a 6K attack going on you, just doing the GARP event, taking back a 2K, and then crushing a 1K card from your end, converting like the event and into 2K card or just one card. So I feel like this card is really interesting. I'm still thinking about playing 2 of them in the deck, but not sure at the moment if it could be great, because it would have increased the number of untouchable cards in my deck by playing 4 Xiaoxi and 2 GARP events. But for the moment, 1 copy is really great. Maybe we'll influence it in the future.
Now looking at your matchup during the Swiss, I noticed that the dominant representation from ZORO and Ace, which we all expected, plus Mirror and One Limb. How did you feel navigating this Swiss and the overall meta?
I think it's an interesting meta because having only 3 really powerful decks leave you really interesting interaction. In some previous meta, we have like 10 different leaders that could be impactful. Here we have only 3, but 3 of them have not that bad matchup against the 3 other. They are quite it's a big equity. I feel overall in this meta, the 3 dominant deck have good matchup against each other and have really more possibilities than we used to have with some other deck, like where we used to have some specific pattern, and outside of this pattern it was quite the same. There was deck that was exception, obviously, but all these 3 decks have a lot of different line going into each other and changing a lot of things in this meta by becoming like a chess game where you have a different type of opening against each deck, and in all this opening you have some subline, and it's make all the game really different, even if it's different leader, and it's quite interesting. And you have some rock deck too, like Lim, that I faced during my Swiss run, that are really interesting and that can do a lot of different things, even if they're a bit worse than the 3 big deck. They can do some really interesting line and apply a lot of pressure to different decks. So I think it's a meta that is more interesting than just a triangle as we think of it, and that we have a lot of different line in this matchup that we didn't see for the moment, and that we could maybe saw a bit more in the future.
And now, talking about the specific matchup, there are the big 3. The first one I want to talk about is Ace. How do you feel about the matchup? How do you approach going first and going second? Which card do you ideally want to see? In which situation you feel that you have the advantage?
Overall, the Ace matchup is quite interesting because the game is more a game of card advantage. You want to take the most value you can on every play. The matchup is a bit complicated because there is a lot of different line. At first, going first or second going to change all the game, but as going first when playing Imu, you want to take advantage of every turn your opponent won't have done on it, and try to make his end as less big as possible by lowering his end as much as you can with not attacking sometime at his leader. Try to play some Zoro to do minus 2k to some of his character, and try to take his board as less as possible until the moment you're going to arrive to the 10k blocker, because you don't want to have another string that go into your life. The sweet spot is to keep your life as big as possible. The ideal is 3, because when you're going to play Roger, it means it will need like 4 other big body before we can do big little on you, and going to make the game more longer, and you're going to be able to pain as much as 5 holder as possible to take as much resources the end out of the ace player as possible. The game going to change a lot depending of who's first and who's second. If your ace player going second, most of the time you're going to play like one shuffle on the first turn, leaving a down to his leader. So at this moment you won't swing on his leader because you will give him an additional card and he will take his life at this moment, giving him a big hand, increasing the difficulty to go for the board in the mid game. When he's going to play his Marco on the far 4 down turn, and then Yamato Gozu on the 6 down turn. You want to develop as much as possible by playing card like Saturn to combine all your pieces and having an additional attack available on your board. And sometime in the mid game you want to play Mars to KO some of his character to negate his board state, and Nashiro to attack on the board. And sometimes even the world equilibrium to KO Jozu or Yamato if it's the only card you have on the board, so that you will be able on the next turn when he stops playing his Blockbeard to breathe as much as possible, because he will only attack with his leader. So I think it's really more interesting matchup than you think. It can be really difficult at first to navigate in it, because there is a lot of different line that can come from the ace player, and you can adapt with all this line with some different play. Sometimes the world equilibrium can be a key card to the mid game. Sometimes Mars is going to be more dependent, depending on the situation. So it's really interesting to see how the ace adapt to the Imu player, and how the Imu player are going to adapt to the ace player in the match. Overall, going first to second is quite different, because if the ace player going second, you're going to play the Blockbeard first before you play your first 5 elder. It's going to increase the number of cards you will need to play to decrease his hand size, making you in a situation where you have your full board state and you won't be able to block with some of your cards, because you will need them to attack a bit more next turn. Like imagine he plays his Blockbeard the turn after you're at 9 down, and you will need to use as much as your board you have at this point of the game, depending on how you develop the situation. And the next turn you could play another Blockbeard, and you will be in a situation where when you're going to resolve your first 5 elder, your opponent going to have 2 card cost blocker. So you will need additional attack to develop after this to take off his hand size. So sometimes you're going to need to expand a bit more on your event in this situation, and keep a bit more your blocker to have additional attack, because obviously if you have 2 blocker, it means that even if you're doing like 5 attacks, 2 of them are going to be negated by his Vegas blocker if you try to torso. Obviously you get an additional one if you attack with your 5 elder next turn when you're going to play it. So you're going to have your base attack on the board, and right after an additional one with your Nashiro. But what is quite interesting is if it's missing a 10 cost blocker on some spots, you're going to decrease his capacity to turtle and make as much 10 cost blocker as possible. Most of the time, if this happens, you're going to play a rotor to try to make the game as fast as possible, because we can't go as defensively as he was. But at the end of the day, if all the players have their pieces, the match is a bit more tough that we can think, depending on if the ace player tries to turtle and don't attack with his 10 cost, or if he tries to increase the pressure on the Imu side. If the ace attack a bit more, you can block a bit more too, because it's one less blocker on the board, so you can get the full value of your 5 elder by blocking and still attack with your other elder on the board state at this moment. Sometime in this type of situation, if your opponent going to turtle and don't attack with if your opponent try to turtle and don't attack with his 10 cost, you will be able to keep a 5 elder on the board. That's a really interesting spot, because you're going to be able to do a 12k attack that you will obviously want to block with one of his 10 cost or a Duta or Marco blocker. And then you will be able to do your leader effect and maybe play another 5-holder or go for game, because with your 5-holder on board, you will be able to get an additional attack of Nashuro for only 1 down, and with your state be able to play another Nashuro from N, and it's going to maybe sometime increase your number of attacks you can play. So the matches is more dependent of the card both players see on the lines they want to take on each turn than on the dice, I think, at the end of the day. Obviously, each player who goes second will be in a better spot by playing their 10 cost before the other, but it's going to be really dependent on how you navigate it in the early game. On which card you will have at the moment 5 to 10, and or each player managed to go to their win con. Obviously, for ace, most of the time it's going to be Roger. So you're going to try to put as much board as possible, 2 or 3 10 cost block build, and at a certain point you're going to maybe play a 8 cost event, taking his life, going to 8k, and then play a 9 cost white build to go to 10k. And obviously at this point it's really difficult for Imu to go for a game, so most of the time the player is going to play the 10 cost to keep it for the next turn and try to survive to the Roger little on the next turn. So it's become more interesting as a question of what's the player going to choose, which lines they're going to develop on how much card each player have in the late game.
Continuing with the matchup, how do you generally manage the mirror matchup whenever you are going first or second?
Depending on which situation, when you're going first, you're going to take more of the aggressive line to go for your opponent, because most of the time there's 2 big lines in the matchup. The first one is if your opponent missing the event in the early game, you're going to be able to marathon his first action when you're going to play it, and you're going to have the aggression line really fast. Most of the time, both players are going to see their events because of the consistency of the deck. So you're going to start a bit of war of position, where each player is going to look at each other and don't attack with their board until they're going to play Jupiter and play as much efficient as they can by playing some Saturn and going to replace themselves in the end, or play some Mercury that's going to be able to sometimes block and draw 1 more card. And then putting your Jupiter on the side of the board, you're going to be able to do 7k on your opponent. During the mid game, you're going to play some events to prevent your 7k attack of your opponent. It's where sometimes CHARLOS is going to shine most of the time, because he will be able to block 7k swing too. In this type of situation, each player wants, in this type of situation, to keep as much board as possible, to apply as much pressure as you can. It's really a type of game where the fundamental happen to outcome a lot of the play. The second player on another side are going to try to go in a contradiction with the other player and try to take off most of his board after the first Jupiter. It's why most of the time the first player won't attack with all his board, just to try a bit of board for the next turn. An opponent would try to decrease his board state, and each player are going to try to navigate in the matchup by lowering the board state of the opponent so they can go for the game. Most of the time, you're going to chain each 5-holder back to back by arriving at 10 down. At this moment, you will have a lot of different decisions. Do I want to my blocker? Do I want to counter? And you won't be able to use your event at this moment, except if you played a 5-holder a turn before, then activate it the next turn. It's not a play that you will do a lot of the time, because it can be really dangerous if your opponent plays STUSSY. As it's going, people try to don't play STUSSY and cut it like I did. You can do it, and the only bad thing that can happen is being outplayed. Most of the time, the first player won't be able to play it on the 9th turn, because it's more the turn where you want to play Jupiter, except if you played it on the 7th turn. Because by going first, you're going to play Saturn on the 3rd turn, another one or a Mercury or sometimes Neushiro or Mars on the 5th turn. On your 7, you can play Jupiter, but if you're going with this line, your opponent would be able to play a Jupiter by his own on attack on your board, and you will be in the lower end. It's really a matchup where the first player who attacks are going to see his board vanished a bit, and you have to try to apply pressure and still keep as much character on the board the next turn to be able to maintain this pressure and maybe go in a position when you're with the board state of your opponent. If you leave too much character, your opponent will sometimes be able to negate all your board, and you can just take your deck and go out of the game because you already lost. In this matchup, you will also want to keep a big amount of life, because higher your life is, the more you can take it at the time your opponent going to play his first Jupiter. Obviously, if you are 2 life, it's harder for your opponent to try to go for the little if you have already 2 blockers on the board. So it's really interesting. Sometimes it can be really dependent of you, and obviously if you start change Saturn, you're in a better spot and position. Mercury going to be able to do a lot of things too, by being like a Swiss Army man, being at the same time in capacity to attack on 7k with Jupiter if you have a lot of board states, and be able to stay up to block one of the opponent 7k the next turn and replace itself if needed. Sometimes it's not the best option. I did this mistake sometime in the semi-final to try to be played too defensively by keeping Mercury on board. We have to remember that this matchup resolves a lot about the pressure you have on your opponents, and by attacking with your Mercury, you will be able to take 2 cards off your opponent hand or 1 life, and can matter a lot, and sometimes you won't be able to kill all your boards the next turn. So taking as much value of your card can be really, really important in this matchup. Obviously, it's hard to find when you can attack and when you can attack with your blocker or when you can't. It's depend a lot of your card in hand, and it will depend a lot of your opponents, because obviously sometimes you will be in a game state where you won't be able to maintain as much pressure as you would want, because attacking with your blocker will mean that maybe your opponents can go for life and apply too much pressure by taking you to 1 or 0 life. It's really a spot where it can be really difficult, but most of the time your opponent's going to catch your board, except if you think he can take you to a really lower spot of your life. I think too there is some other line where you can play Neushiro in the early turn, try to negate the opponent board. Really depending of the situation. Obviously it's better to put as much board as you can, because you're getting more value out of Jupiter by swinging more 7 and lowering faster the opponent end. But sometimes Neushiro can open you some line where you're going to lower the number of character on your opponent's side. That's why it's really hard to define exactly which spots you want to keep your board, and which spots you can attack and leave it, because of this Neushiro that can sometimes be really impactful the turn you arrive. Even if your opponent can play 2 characters, the only now taking out one of yours will be able to do a big value on if you stay on board to apply another pressure next turn by being able to decrease faster the number of card of your board.
And finally, the last matchup. How did you feel about ZORO? And how do you usually approach to it?
I think out of the big three, ZORO is a matchup where you have a less specific line. Most of the time, you just want to take value out of all the elder you're going to play. It means that if you play the early Saturn, you will trash it with your leader effect instantly to do an extra card out of it. Because with all the cards Zoro play, you can rest all your character and you will just attack with it with his leader and then go to your life, so it won't change anything. Most of the time you won't swing at his life, you will just try to develop your own size, try to find your pieces until you arrive to the 10 down turn. Try to negate his board state by playing Mars to KO his defensive blocker if you have it, or to KO his Teishigi or any other 5 cost or less you would have. The Focusor that can be really painful in the matchup because you will never be able to attack in it. Trying to play as much Mars and no Euro to attack on the board until you arrive to the 10 down turn, where you try to stabilize as much as possible and negate all the board states. If you arrive to the 10 down turn with 2 or 3 life, I think you are in a really good spot because you will need so much resources from the Zoro player to try to take only one of your life or even a second one. So you will be able to stabilize at this moment. The specific moment that can be complicated in the matchup is if he's able to play Miyok down to Zoro, then the blocker that can prevent Zoro from being KO by Mars. At this specific part, you can be in really bad situation because you will be able to apply a lot of pressure. But most of the time, with your leader, we will have an additional swing to go into his board at the moment they're going rested, and you will try to manage to be stabilized as much as possible. The interesting thing in this matchup is that most of the time you're going to trash your character after play them, except the situation where you play like a Mars on your 8 or 7 down turn, and you will be able to play a Valkyrie with it, so you will be able to block one swing from Zoro and the other swing with the other blocker. Or sometimes if you play a Tashigi attack into the blocker, you will be able to block constantly with the other blocker. In some specific spots, even if it rest one of the blocker, he will just attack into your leader, because if you attack in the blocker, it will just be able to restand itself and attack to your leader. But if you attack to your leader first, if you block, you will be able to attack again to your leader, so your blocker will be negated at this moment. It's why most of the time, if this type of scenario happen, you will just take your life or prevent it with an event, and then if you attack with a Tashigi, you will take value of your blocker. If you try to don't attack with his Tashigi, you will lose a bit of momentum, and you will keep your blocker for the next turn and will be able to build a bigger wall than expected until you arrive to the 10 down turn, where you want to stabilize a bit if you still have board states by attacking with Najuro, doing -2k, and try to kill what's left. Then you can just leader effect on your Najuro, because at this point, when you just start playing your 10 cost, you won't have any board on the state, so you won't have activated your leader effect to do an extra card. So playing it on Najuro means you won't have any rested card that you can attack with his leader, and then it's putting you the possibility to play like a Valkyrie or even a CHARLOS blocker to have an additional blocker on the next Zoro turn, making you in a situation where if he deads man game, you will still have another blocker to block the board, and if you don't, you will be able to block one time, going to restand itself. You will be able to block a second time, and after this, if you have the restand event, you will be able to block a third time, meaning you will be able to kill the extra board that Zoro could still have with your 2 additional 7k swing. or just be able to start going for the live on applying a 2-turn clock by playing another 5 elder right after. I think after you understand how you can get most of the value out of ZORO, it's maybe the matchup where it's easier to navigate it because there is less line of play for the ZORO matchup and for the Imu player. Most of the time you will try to play the same line until you have to the tendon turn where you want to do this specific turn where you're going to play your 5 elder and try to play a 3rd blocker and keeping some time to play your event if you need to still keep an amount of life that ZORO won't be able to take to kill you. Regarding of the ace matchup, there is also some line that can be really interesting for the ace player. Playing pudding on some specific spot can be really devastating for the Imu player. Admitting you take your first life by going first or second with 5 in and first, then drawing your first card, you can most of the time go to 7 or 8 if you don't counter the early attacks. And pudding can be really devastating, so you will have to play around this card. Ideally, you want to counter all the starting turn of ace, but if you go first, sometime you're going to just put free down on his leader on the free down turn, going for 9k, and you're going to take your life. So arriving on your 5 down turn, you will have like 8 cards, even if you play a card from end, such you're not going neutral. Sometimes you want just to play Workery to keep your hand as less interesting for a pudding play at this certain spot, but most of the time it's going to be important to defend yourself as much as possible, because lowering your hand to 5 and meaning your opponent will be able to attack an additional time with like a 7 on his 5th turn, meaning you're going to be in a really tough situation to survive in the mid game and keep your life as up as possible before you're going to play Roger. In another regard, another interesting play for the S player on the 4 down turn or the 5 down turn can be, at most, it don't happen a lot. It's most of the time a card for his mirror. But if the Imu player has difficulties to arrive to 7 card in his trash, you don't have to forget that this card exists and can put a card in your hand like a Saturn or a Wakui. Most of the time you won't put Saturn in your hand again, because then you can have an additional search, but you will negate an additional attack you could do in the early game with your Saturn. That means that you won't be able to apply as much pressure as you wanted. Regarding of that, there is a lot of different tech card the ace player can play. Nowadays they're playing less taxpayer and more of Nightmare, because arriving to 10k is really difficult for Imu. So you want to prevent this basic keeping as much card as possible during the mid game. And pudding can really destroy all your mid game play regarding that. So you have to counter as much as possible and take most of the value by if you can counter with just 1 card in your hand, and if it's really needed, counter with 2 of them. Just to be sure you won't be in a situation where you're just like pudding and your opponent can squeeze the game just by this. I think pudding is an important card, because for ace player it's an occasion that they can take if they have the opportunity and can put themselves in a really bigger position. We don't have to forget it. Being at 4 life means we can easier take a life when your opponent going to do a 9k swing on your leader, meaning you just can take your life where you would be supposed to, if you want to counter, trash to card off your hand, like an event or on a 2k or a 1k. So I think it's important to specify this type of situation.
And against which other matchup do you want to play the cost 1 stage?
I think at the end of the day, most of the time you're going to play the 7-cost stage, except in the mirror, where it's obvious why you don't play the 7-cost stage. Even in Lim matchup, I think you really want to play the 7-cost stage because you want to stabilize with your 5 elder. Meaning you will need to have some extra done playing an additional blocker like in the ZORO situation to stay alive against Lim if you play your Deadman games and to keep a bit of event to counter. I think it's better to play the 7-cost stage against Lim. Against the Acro matchup, it can be really dependent of who is going first and who is going second. I think in this type of situation, it will be interesting to play the 1-cost stage, because if you're going first, you will be able to play like Saturn or Valkyrie on the pre-dawn turn and be able to play some kind of way that look like a bit like the mirror with Jupiter or some kind of other card without needing too much. But playing the 1-cost stage means that arriving to the 10-dawn turn, you will just be able to activate your 5 Elder and won't be able to have extra event at this point. But against aggro, it doesn't really matter because it's much a bit more about how much card you can have arriving to the 10-dawn turn. Except from this, I think some purple matchup like playing Magellan, like Purple Luffy, you want to go first with the 1-cost stage, meaning that even when you arrive at the 9-dawn turn, if you play the Magellan, you are everything to 8, and the next turn you will be able to go to 10. That's an interesting line, except if you have 2 Magellan, statistically a bit more complicated. And taking that out of a P-Luffy, the curve you will prefer that is playing first, it could be interesting. Even sometime if you're going second, it will be able to get an extra life and play his Magellan out of this turn. That will be really painful. It's quite a matchup that can be really hard to navigate in, because at some point it's a matchup that you won't see as much as you would expected. Regularly in my Switch report, this was most of the time the 3 dominant deck, except some rock deck exception like Lim. I know some player that played Roger or some kind of deck, but you won't see that much Luffy or aggro deck. It will be interesting to develop a bit more this matchup and train a bit more to see what is the perfect line. At the end of the day, there is a situation where you're going to play the 1-cost stage. To be fair, I didn't develop as much as I could on any rock deck. The thing is, it's always the same. If you want to practice too much against rock decks, you're taking less time against the dominant one.
I don't think that you want to.
No. Yeah, knowing that you're going to see most of the time on Ace, you perfectly know that your chance of hitting a Purple Luffy or a Light or any other deck like him are really low. I think it's some kind of deck you need to practice 1 or 2 times to see your mark. But this type of matchup really looking like some other match. I think like the Lim matchup look a bit more like the ZORO matchup than anything else, with more pressure in the early games than ZORO. Lim can easier kill you before you arrive to your 10-dawn turn and activate your first 5 Elder, where ZORO most of the time going to give you the last kill after the 5 Elder. So it's what can be really different. And the aggro deck like Raylight, it's quite the same, but they survive a bit less with the Starve, because you're going to kill as much board as possible, and when you're going to go for big body like the Luffy or the Sanji, you can just mask them and they don't have any protection for it, and you can get a lot of value by with your board by your leader effect. So it's not that hard to maintain the defensive spot with this type of matchup. So I think it would be a bit more interesting to expand and train a bit more this matchup, but I don't think this type of deck are in a really good spot in the OP13 meta.
Thomas, thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this interview. Make sure to follow him on all his social. You'll find the links down in the description below. And thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you very much. It was really fun to do this video, and I hope I can see you next time.
Bye!
Bye!